Welcome to the Property and Coffee Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Atkinson.
I'm Matt Skehan.
We'll be fueling your financial future, one coffee and property insights at a time.
Helping you navigate the property market like a pro.
Hello, and what a pleasure it is to have your company today on the Property and Coffee Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Atkinson, joined by my co-host, Matt Skehan.
Thanks, Matty.
And our guest today is Mitchell Lawrence, who is a recent addition to the Azure Buyers Agents team. Welcome, Mitch. Thank you for coming along and joining us on the pod.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Perfect. Before we dive into it, we're just going to touch on what we're going to be talking about today. So firstly, Mitch brings a unique view in the sense he spent a couple of years in sales alongside Bailey Whites in the corridor from Frankston down to Safety Beach. So with that theme in mind, we're going to be unpacking a few things. So the first is we're just going to get a bit of the Gen Z perspective and a bit about your journey. We're going to deep dive into that corridor, Frankston down to Safety Beach, and understand a bit more what people should be thinking if you're looking to buy or invest in that space. We're going to be touching on vendor advocacy, which will be a topic that might be new to a lot of our listeners, and just understanding, what value that role fulfills. And we'll be wrapping up with some pre-sale and actionable tips. So firstly, let's get into it.
Yeah, thanks, Matty. So Mitch, the hard-hitting question first, mate. Favourite coffee and where do you like to drink it, mate?
Certainly. So the favourite coffee would probably be the one I make in my own living room, to be honest, Matty.
You make it yourself?
Make it myself.
So you rate your coffee making ability?
I do very much so. And, the cost of living crisis with us Zoomers, we like the coffee at home and save the pennies when you can. But outside of that, I'd say One Pear Tree in Frankston.
That's a great spot. I love One Pear Tree there. That's a beautiful little spot. For those of you who think Frankston's no good, you go to One Pear Tree and it'll change your mind. I think it's a good little spot there, isn't it? So,
absolutely.
Beautiful.
Well, Mitch, we might change tack a little bit. And look, we're going to be focusing a bit more on your demographic, being in the mid-20s, and just getting a bit of an insight in terms of, especially on the BBQ Chat, what you're sort of talking about, what some of the conversations will be going around in your sort of social circles. So, what we might start off with first is just to understand a bit about your journey, one, into the property space. What sort of hurdles did you have to sort of jump through to get your first set of keys, and people in your age category would be dealing with at the moment?
So a little bit about myself, Matt, is I'm a Frankston boy by heart. So Frankston born and raised, and sort of push down the university route by teachers and parents outside of school, and was studying marketing and finance, and really didn't see a clear pathway. I've got a bit of ADHD, can't sit still, and couldn't see myself sitting at a desk at the end of uni.
Gen Z, isn't it, mate? Isn't it just Gen Z? No,
just Gen Z, sure.
No.
And so it was really through COVID where I dived into real estate and sort of fell into it per se, and that's where my passion for property really started. So worked in a sales office for about 5 years. Worked on the Peninsula and privileged to sell some amazing homes, and then most recently jumped across to Matt Skehan team at Azure. So
it's Team Azure, mate. It's not Team Matt Skehan, so just get that right. But no, it's a pleasure to have you on board and pleasure to have you today, because I think there'll be some gold nuggets, mate. You've worked under some fantastic operators, so yeah, really
Absolutely.
keen. I think having perspective on both sides of the fence, mate, it's invaluable as well. So I think it's a tough market out there. So having some tips and guidance, and that's what we're all about at the Property and Coffee Podcast, empowering our audience. So.
Fair enough. And just touch on, before we move on to something else, just about your journey into getting to your own, property, getting your first set of keys. What did that look like for you, and where did you end up looking to sort of purchase, given you've obviously got, you got the buyer's advocate hat, but also on the sales side. So you would know a fair bit more around, better than most, when you're looking to buy your first house and where you're wanting to buy it.
Yeah, certainly. So we, my partner and I were fortunate enough to buy our first home in Langwarrin, which is almost 2 years ago. It's absolutely flown, to be honest. And, the time we purchased it was tough. It was tough. Interest rates were at their peak, and we were both on, quite humble incomes at the time. So it was just really about, saving as much as we could at the time to get that entry into the deposit, and really, utilise the government schemes as well. So, as you would know, we use that 5% deposit scheme.
Yep.
And no LMI. So pretty powerful, and that helped us sort of, put some money aside that we could, put back into the property as well with some renovations. So we bought in Langwarrin. Mm-hmm. It was a house we bought, and it was really sort of, my philosophy was, buying the best asset we could with our budget. So we were priced out of other areas and houses with more land content. So it was really, buying the best asset we could at the time. So
perfect. No, thank you for sharing.
You've landed in a good spot, mate. Now you're the mayor of Langwarrin, mate. So the leafy Langwarrin, mate. So Winston rules the streets. So Winston, for the listeners, is your lovely dog, mate, isn't it? Your child,
the fur baby, yeah,
the fur baby, mate. Pets and kids, mate. They're equally expensive and part of the family these days. So that's and as an advocate, mate, like, pets come up in our wish list all the time for clients. Like, they need the backyard for the dog or the cat and stuff. So pets are absolutely part of the fabric of an Aussie household these days. I know I'm probably going to get a dog in my household, whether I like it or not. I'm outvoted already with my family, but no, I think it's a great thing. So just moving on there, mate. So obviously Gen Z, and you obviously so with the 5% deposit, that really helps you get into the market, which is fantastic. Amongst your friends, your peers and stuff, I think you'd know this more, Matty, but isn't the bank of mum and dad, is that considered the 5th biggest lender or something? But are a lot of mates tapping into the bank of mum and dad to get going? Do you know, or is that? Or?
Look, some certainly are if they're in that sort of fortunate position where their parents can help out, and some aren't as fortunate, and there's other ways around that, and that may be getting mum and dad to go guarantor. That's happened for a lot of friends, just to sort of get their foothold in the first property, and there's options around there, and I think it's definitely worth chatting with an expert like a broker to really get that perspective. So.
No, it's important, isn't it? Because I think you don't know what you don't know and stuff. So and we say it all the time: property is a game of finance. That's where I said, Matty, it's hopefully people talk to. We send people your way if haven't already. Just otherwise we can't do much on our side, right? You can't.
That's where it all starts, right?
So correct.
No, that's it. And it's once you know what you can borrow, right? There's sometimes the rest of the conversations flow a little bit easier. Manage expectations. But as you would appreciate, we'll touch on it now. Sometimes that first deposit ultimately is almost hardest to get, and then
that's always the hardest thing. The first step is always the hardest,
that equity will look to grow. But so if we think about someone in their mid-20s that's listening and maybe feeling locked out, they're wanting to buy in that corridor that well, sort of down Frankston through to Safety Beach. What's the number one piece of advice you would give them to say, just in terms of to start that journey and start taking some actionable steps ready to get going with their home journey? So is that something where should they be speaking to a professional, or potentially around adjusting expectations? Where do you recommend they would start?
Yeah, I would say speaking with a professional first, just to have an understanding of where your borrowing capacity is and where would it need to be in order to get your foot into the market, and then it comes down to what's it worth to you? What's the sacrifice you're willing to make, and is that staying at home? Like for myself, I lived at home when I was working full time just to save that deposit. And all my mates were, out on weekends, on the beers and going out. But it's to me, it's property is more important.
Be pretty expensive these days, isn't it? With the price of beer and inflation, I think the price of I think you can't even get a pot anymore, isn't it? I think schooners are making it. I think I was reading about that in the AFR. Schooners and pints, like it's hard to get pots these days, So we're I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not even drinking these days, but the fact you don't drink, you save a lot of money, right? So
absolutely,
that's good to hear, mate. So transitioning now into the professional side. So obviously you've joined our team, but the last few years you worked under probably one of the best and sharpest operators on the Peninsula, Bay the White, their team in the Marshall White office in Mount Eliza. What was the biggest lesson, I suppose, that now being on the buying side, what was the biggest lesson you bring from being on the dark side? No, I'm just kidding. On the sales side, what do you bring?
Certainly. So it was very privileged to work in such a high performing office and one of the biggest offices there on the Peninsula. Quite a big team. There was 25 of us in
the sales team.
Yeah, in the sales team, property management,
big
operations team as well, and admins. But huge team, and fortunate to work a lot of great agents there as well as Bailey. So I think, you really get to see what goes on behind the scenes and what it takes to, get a deal together, get a transaction together. And it's really, it's really, the strategy that goes into it, the timing behind things. And I think that's really, carried over moving into the buyer's role. And I can, I understand how they think, how an agent thinks, and really how we can make the transaction smooth and calm for our clients as well.
Awesome.
Give us just a quick 30-second temperature check. What's the vibe in terms of demand and people wanting to buy in that Frankston to Safety Beach corridor at the moment?
Yeah, certainly. It's a very confident but disciplined market, I would say as well. And we're finding well-priced properties on the Peninsula are selling like hotcakes quite quickly. But it's really, the properties that are overreaching or might not be aligned correctly, they're still sitting. So I think buyers, there's certainly some choice out there for them, but they're more selective and still price sensitive when it comes to property.
Okay. Price rights and value for the buyer, they sound like it's in demand, but as I said, where previous times going by, I always think of back to COVID when, interest rates were so low, debt almost felt like it was free. Yeah. People were overpaying 20 or 30% for, those days I think are also thing of the past and probably not a bad thing either, where it's, sort of you're just people throwing up money at anything that had sort of four walls and a roof.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a two-tier market, isn't it? We're definitely seeing stuff that's ready to go, going for more, and stuff that needs work. People with the hangover from COVID and all that sort of stuff. I think there's still a bit of scaredness around the renovation side of things as well. So I think there's definitely
costs, definitely.
Yeah, people prepared to pay for convenience. They're time poor busy, so they're happy just to have something. So I think we're seeing those perform a bit stronger as well. So again, mate, a common budget that we often get, say you've got about $1 million, which is about the median house price in Melbourne, give or take, the stats and it changes, but that 900 to a mil is the median house price across Melbourne. What can I get into Frankston South or that around? What can I get? Like what with $1 million, is it enough or what's it getting these days?
Yeah, crazy to think about, really. I remember growing up, $1 million was, the dream house, all the bells and whistles, but it's in reality today, it's not. $1 million into the Frankston South market, and you're really looking at land value and compromise. It's it's a tough pill to swallow, but there's certainly some options out there for you. It might be something with a unit with some less land content, but you still got that sort of coastal lifestyle, or something that may need some sort of uplift as well with renovation.
I think there was a sale or two in Kringle last year that went over $1 million. So if Kringle's getting over $1 million, Frankston South got a little bit more owner-occupier appeal, we'd like to think. So yeah, it's definitely harder, isn't it? But yeah, as you said, compromise is the key, and we take our clients through the buyer's decision quadrant. I think it's really important to make sure that they get those priorities right, and is it location or they move out a bit further. So I think it's important just to be that advisor on the move. So
absolutely. Yep.
A recent notable sale down in Mount Eliza was a house selling for $7.3 million to the Piastri family, which for Australians...
Never heard of them, Matty. Who's the Piastri family, mate? I'll live under a rock.
Well, there you go, mate. Well, Oscar in F1 would obviously jump to mind. But look, he needs a place to crash, and I'm sure it's $7 million. His folks snapping something up there. Hopefully, there's a spare bed from down there. But that is it's a one obviously in the news, and it's a quite a high price point relative when you look at the average Australian house price. What does that do for an area like Mount Eliza at that price point? Does it lift the floor amongst property prices, or how do you sort of view that with your buyer's advocate hats on?
Yeah, certainly, and it's very very notable sale and beautiful part of the world. It's in the Golden Mile, they call it in Mount Eliza. It's where the prestige real estate is, right? And I wouldn't say a trophy sale would raise the floor. In reality, it's not unique or an outlier for Mount Eliza. There's a handful of sales in pushing this $6 million, especially in this golden mile in Mount Eliza. So I don't think it changes the market or what someone else's home's worth or how we perceive it. But I think it puts Mount Eliza on the map. For someone that's interstate or in Sydney.
News, mate. It's Piastri.
It's in the news, right? Yeah. It's in the news. So it puts it on the map. most definitely. So.
Oh, fantastic. So I often say this to clients, and particularly if we're dealing with clients interstate or Sydney and stuff, like I often say, Mount Eliza is the Toorak of the south. So everyone's heard of Toorak, right? Like it's like you've heard of in Sydney, you know, everyone's heard of Bondi. But why do people say, that Mount Eliza is the Toorak of the south? What does that mean?
It's the perfect storm, really, Matty. It's you've got the prestige schools, the coastal lifestyle. You've got the land and the views as well. So there's some, properties with great land content.
So I think that Piastri property too was on 1,600 sort of square meters.
Yeah,
so it's
almost half an acre.
Yeah. So it's a decent bit of dirt as well, right? So
absolutely. So I think that's really, really wide is known as sort of that Toorak of the south. And on top of that, it's just got this quiet village aspect to it as well. It's really sort of, a tight-knit community.
And if you're down there in Mount Eliza Way, you'll notice there's lots of European SUVs as well. So it definitely has that Toorak tractor sort of vibes about it. No. So
it's a Toorak College, for example.
Enough said. We don't. There's. It just makes sense. No, it's an absolute cracking part of the world. I was just down at Mount Martha Lifesaving Club on the weekend for a Nippers Carnival, and which is borders of lovely Mount Eliza, beautiful part of the world, and you can see the city and. As I said, with the connectivity now with Peninsula Link and freeways, I think it's only become, and it's going to become more popular because it's got, as you said, it's got education, lifestyle in spades, and it's a fantastic place to raise a family and to still be close, but not too close.
Absolutely.
To the riffraff of Frankston. No, I love Frankston, so it's a good part of the world.
Moving on to a different topic now, we're going to just unpack a bit around vendor advocacy. So Mitch, just first up, can you give us a brief insight? What is a vendor advocate and why would a seller look to use one?
Certainly. So a vendor advocate is essentially someone who represents the seller's best interests. So they're there to, appoint the agent. They're there to help you with negotiations and really be in your corner. So it just takes that stress off your shoulders as a vendor, and you've got someone in your corner there to essentially guide you through the transaction and that real sort of trusted advisor on your side.
I think you mentioned sort of stress. I think getting married and having kids, but selling a house is they're probably the big three, right? So I think having someone impartial, sort of take like I often say in our role, like we're there to care, but not too much, because I think you want to clear head decisions, and it's a lot of money at stake. Often it's people's biggest asset, isn't it, Matty? You know that from seeing people's sort of financials day in, day out. I think getting it right, it's important because it can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars with the wrong agent, the wrong, unnecessary stress and anxiety. So I think that's the important feature. Just helping people navigate a very stressful situation as well. So.
It's very emotional as well on the transaction, and it's just good to have that sort of level head.
And an expert on your side. Yeah. So I think vendor advocacy is probably less known than buyer's advocacy, but I think it's growing, and for a reason, because people, again, you'd notice this, isn't it? We're big intergenerational wealth transfer. All the boomers who had it easy, isn't it? You Zoomers hate the boomers because they had it easy. Bought a house in Mount Eliza for a packet of chips, and now it's worth multi-millions. But I think it's important to make sure you maximise your asset, really. So
absolutely.
So, having been a sales agent, obviously, you're very familiar with that process and you know what a good and a bad sales agent look for. But acting, on behalf of a vendor, what's something, a tip in terms of vetting an agent for your client? Like, the average punter obviously doesn't do this for a living, but what's important when you're vetting an agent?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of vendors really choose their agent, who they feel comfortable with and, who they have rapport with. And ultimately, putting the sales cap on, it's when looking at vetting an agent or appointing an agent, it's who's going to put the most money in my pocket.
Yep.
That's what's most important. So it's, diving into that, it's really looking at the agent, what's their strategy? How are they going to maximize the sale here? And, how do they deal with the buyers?
Yep.
How do they create that genuine competition and ultimately lead to the highest possible price for my home?
So I think that's a good point, isn't it? So it's not about, it's like, I suppose, Matt, it's not if someone comes to you and say, I want the best rate for my mortgage. I think that's not the right question, is it? But what's the process? What's the strategy? Because I think I think a lot of people get that wrong, because at the end of the day, you need to have a process, because you don't have the result. You can't control it. You can influence it, and that's what you're trying to do, right? Isn't it? So I think that's that's a really important question. So yeah.
Maybe let's just build on that point. So with keeping your vendor advocate hat on, how do you spot an agent that's potentially trying to buy the listing and really sort of, put forward that they can get the best or the highest price? And how would you, go about protecting your client from that?
Yeah, it's one of the oldest things in real estate's, buying the listing and putting a, high price on your home to buy it per se. And I think, when an agent is looking to list your property, it's really their pricing strategy needs to have some evidence and substance behind it. It's what's recently sold, what how does your home compare to those sales, and also what genuine buyers are out there in the marketplace right now. I think that's really important to look for, and there essentially needs to be some sort of evidence leading back to their justification on price. It's just not a figure. Yeah,
true.
So just to help the average home seller out there, how many sales should it do you like to normally present? So you can talk about evidence being really important. 3, 5, 10. I know every property is different, but to help people, how many sales would you normally like to see?
It's hard to sort of put a set number on that, but it just comes down to what properties are most comparable. So what's like to like for your home. That's going to reflect the best in price. So we look at how many bedrooms does your home have? Mm-hmm. Where's it located compared to these sales? Is it beachside Mount Eliza, or is it the other side of the highway, for example?
It's the same price, isn't it? If I'm a vendor, non-beachside, I'm sure you've had people compare it to beachside properties. There's probably a slight disparity in price there, isn't it? So
bit of an uplift over the highway.
It's the rose tinted glasses, isn't it?
Yeah, most definitely. So it's how do the sales compare to my home?
Yep.
And also, you want it to be in the same market as well. I think if we're looking at sales 6 or 12 months ago, it would be very different to today's market. Things have shifted.
100%, mate, 100%. So having, back to that vendor advocacy space, so having you involved in the middle, how does that change the dynamic or the relationship between the homeowner and the sales agent? How does that function?
Yeah, certainly. It's might be a little uncomfortable for some. Uncomfortable in the industry, but I think agents.
For some, when you say some, you mean are you talking about a sales agent?
In terms of sales agents. Yep. So I feel agents work better when someone's watching them.
They do work better.
Yep.
So yep.
So when someone's watching them, they work better, and it really just takes that emotional manipulation out of the equation.
Okay. It's that accountability. So the accountability piece, I think that's what you're saying, and a conduit. So yep.
Absolutely.
Okay.
First thing someone's probably going to want to understand, they want to get a vendor advocate on board, is what will it cost? So what people may be unaware of, typically the service can essentially cost $0. Can you just unpack a bit around from a transparency perspective? How does that structure work from the pay structure?
Yeah, exactly. So it's the vendor doesn't pay anything extra. So essentially, a vendor advocate's fee is shared with the sales agent that's appointed in the sale, and the benefit for the vendor is that they're getting that extra layer of support during negotiations and that extra expert in their corner for no extra fee.
So you mentioned a share fee, and obviously not going to hold you to this, but is there an average that you think a vendor, because obviously everyone's different, but what sort of have you seen typically reported or within industry? What's the split between the sales agent and the vendor advocate?
Yeah, I think everyone is.
I know
different.
It varies.
It varies,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
But if you would put an average on it, it's probably 20 to 50%. I would say is that sort of average of the fee.
I think that's what I'm.
Depending on their level of involvement as well in their transaction.
Yeah, cool. It's good to know, right? Because the average person would have no clue. So,
Mitch, we've got a couple of questions we're going to fire at you just as we look to wrap up, and some snippets that people can take away and give some thought to. So, if we look, you're looking to sell your house, you're in the corridor, the Frankston to Safety Beach, and you got a limited budget. What are you looking to do to add a bit of value to get your home sales ready to hit the market?
Certainly, I think 9 times out of 10, I would look at styling your home. So whether that's professional styling or doing it yourself, and buyers, they're not paying for what a home could be. They're paying for what it feels like when they walk through the door. So it helps create that emotional connection with the property. That often makes buyers pay more.
I think that's a really salient point there, Mitch. Like it is, people get that wrong. It's emotions, right? That sells, right? Emotions sell, and home's where your heart is. That's for a reason, right? Like, if you fall in love with it, and often it won't be stereotypical here, but if the wife falls in love with it, your sales agents love that, right? Because they know there's a connection, or the parents around the corner or school, and it's forming that. They're already moved in. And that's, and so I think that, people underestimate how important that is, right? The feel, the vibe, and the emotions associated with it.
It's creating those spaces that are more than just four walls.
Yeah, no one wants to live in a warehouse, right? Or a sort of nondescript space that doesn't have a good feeling, and so it's got to have homely vibes. I think that's
create some memories.
Yep, correct.
So, as a vendor, what is one of the biggest mistakes a vendor would make when an offer finally hits the table and comes through?
I think the biggest mistake they could make is taking that offer too soon without knowing all the information. So I think the first offer, it's not a verdict. It's an invitation to the table. And you really need to dive into, who's the buyer? What's their urgency behind this purchase, and how flexible are they on terms? And ultimately, who else is in the mix? Are there more buyers where you can create that genuine competition? And I think that's really important when you need all the information before you can make an informed decision.
I think it's, again, and being more on the buying side in my career, I think you often don't put your best foot forward off the bat. Everyone expects a little bit of a dance, right? So I think that's a good point. You want someone who works for you, particularly on that side, isn't it? And works hard for their commission, and making sure that they do extract as much value, for often your biggest asset, right? So it's important. So
well said.
Yep. So sort of just finishing up here, Mitchie. So before someone even picks up the phone to call a real estate agent, what is the one pre-flight task that you recommend every vendor performs to ensure they don't get, I suppose what you said before is they don't get sold that high price, right? Like they get an agent coming in and promising the unicorn result, which we know unicorns are, as I tell my 6-year-old, unicorns are, I don't say they're not real, but yeah, how do we help the vendor?
I think you need to look at someone who's not benefiting from the transaction. So who's not a listing agent that gets benefited by selling your property. And my tip would be chat to your broker. Maybe that's getting a bank valuation to understand where you sit in the market.
That's a good tip. Do you get many of those, Maddie, where people come to you before they're looking at engaging an agent? Do you ever get that, or not? Not really, no.
Not really, to be honest. It's probably something that's also like a relatively easy lever to pull.
You can call Logic, or you can get a desktop val pretty easy, can't you, these days? Yeah.
Look, and we do, for when we're going through, maybe we're doing a bit of a loan review and people are just wanting to understand if obviously the product and that's still right fit for their strategy. We'll go have a look and understand the pricing points. But you're right, it's something that's cost effective and a great place to start, and something, data that can be accessed relatively easily.
Property is a game of finance. I say that regularly, so it's important, right? So that's a really good tip. And even if Matt's not getting a lot of inquiry, I think that people leaving money on the table, right? And let's be honest, sales agents and used car salesmen, aren't the most trusted professions in the world, right? So it's good to have your own independent information going into the process.
Third party.
Someone who cares but not too much, and helps you make the right choice for your property. So that's a really good tip, man.
I also think, so typically speaking, bank valuations are typically conservative, which is, again, not a bad place to start. But there's so many moving parts. If you're looking to sell, you're just trying to get an agent appointed or an advocate appointed and just get on the process, and you're potentially looking to buy another place.
It's another dotting your I, crossing your T, I think, isn't it? It's making sure that you don't leave anything on the table, and you just go in a bit more informed. I think that informs it, educated is important.
And that's it. So it's definitely something, a lever people look to visit, and if you got, as I said, that professional team on board, something you could work out pretty easily.
Agree.
Awesome. Oh.
Mitch, thank you for coming along and sharing a bit of insights, about your journey and obviously joining the Azure Buyers Agents team. But just understanding a bit more what a bit of insight into that peninsula or that corridor, Frankston down to Safety Beach, and also vendor advocacy. That's something I'm sure, as I said, probably not as well known.
It's definitely not as well known. I think it's buyers agencies sort of everywhere these days. It's growing, but vendor advocacy is a little bit behind. I think in terms of awareness. Yeah,
we'll probably be seeing a bit more of that in years to come, and I'm pretty confident that's going to be building out.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mitch.
Thank you for having me.
If you would like to keep receiving property insights and golden nuggets from our guests, please do follow us and you'll get the latest episode released on a fortnightly basis.